The Trumpet Daily program begins right now.
Today's world news, what it means, where it's taking us.
I bring you the one and only possible message of world peace.
This is a message of hope, tremendous hope. And he said unto me, you must prophesy again.
And now, The Trumpet Daily with Stephen Flurry.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. We have a live show today, a little bit of technical difficulty coming in, so we're just glad to be right on the air. Our email server's down. I dumped a bunch of clips on the staff right at the last second, and we've got a reduced staff here, by the way, just two gentlemen in the control booth, and I won't mention who they are, but if things go wrong today, I'll certainly point them out then. So, we're going to pick up on a similar theme that we had yesterday. My father's article in the latest Trumpet, remember, a new government is coming. He said there it's becoming clearer than ever that the leaders and governments of this world do not have real answers to the problems that we face. And we're seeing that every day. They don't have the answers. The problems just get worse and worse. And then they keep trying new things, different things, contradictory things, things that contradicted what we were told just a few months ago, maybe a few weeks ago. Yesterday after the show, I went home and I was eating some breakfast, turned on the morning show, one of the morning shows. I don't know if it was ABC or NBC, but they had a segment with all of these cool graphics, and it was about how that as the weather turns colder, people are going to be going more and more or spending more and more time inside, and that's where the germs will really spread. And so, with a second or perhaps a third wave of COVID-19, we've got to be really careful and try to find ways to bring some fresh air into our houses. And just a few weeks ago, or a few months ago perhaps, everyone was being told, go inside, stay inside. In New York City, in the cramped quarters of New York City, you go inside. You stay in your apartment. Don't you dare go outside. There's a disease, a pandemic. And now here's this segment yesterday. I just sat there shaking my head. Now they're saying, well, look, it's going to be dangerous if we all go inside during the colder months. Where was that back in March and April? Where was that segment? What happened to that segment? Speaking of the back and forth, or the different messages, the contradictory messages, Andrew Cuomo, he's the governor of New York, came out yesterday and, as far as that nursing home tragedy, all those COVID-19 positives being sent into nursing homes, he said yesterday, well, it never happened. It never happened. Here's clip 14.
And we never needed nursing home beds because we always had hospital beds. So it just never happened in New York where we needed to say to a nursing home, we need you to take this person even though they're COVID positive. It never happened.
It never happened, he said. He issued the order, March 25th, I think it was, ordering nursing homes to take in COVID-positive patients. That was back at the end of March. Then in April or May, the Associated Press reported that 4,500 people with COVID-19 had been sent into nursing homes. This was reported by the Associated Press. And, of course, after the massacre happened, then New York quietly rescinded the order, tried to delete some of the evidence, and then sure enough, there he is yesterday saying it never happened. He told whoever is interviewing him, it just never happened. And I'm sure there's plenty of people that will believe him. Jesus talked about Pharisees that he encountered in his day as being whited sepulchres. They look really good on the outside. They're very well spoken. They present the argument, whatever it might be, very well. But what's going on the inside? There's all this sickness, there's this rottenness, dead men's bones. That's what we see so much of today. It's all about the show, isn't it? It's all about the appearance. It's all about what you say right here and now. There was an open mic yesterday in Pennsylvania. This is the Pennsylvania governor, Tom Wolf, and one of the state representatives, Representative Ullman. She's the woman in this clip. And they're getting ready for a press conference, and you can hear them in the background talking about, well, I'm going to take off my mask, and then the woman speaks up and says, yeah, we've got to keep on the mask for the camera initially for a little bit of political theater. Here's clip 15.
So Wendy, I'm going to take my mask off when I speak.
I will as well. I'm waiting so that we can do a little political theater.
Okay.
So that it's on camera.
That's the governor saying, Wendy, I'm going to take my mask off. And she said, well, yeah, I will eventually too. But for now, while the camera's on, for a little bit of political theater. That's her words. And this is the governor talking to her, the governor of Pennsylvania. Both of them acknowledging and chuckling that it's all about the show. It's all about how it looks for the camera. You may have seen that report. I think it was last week. Dianne Feinstein, wasn't it? She was in an airport. It was, if I have the senator wrong, it was someone that's calling for mandatory mask wearing everywhere in an airport. She walks through without a mask on. It's all about the show, isn't it? So much hypocrisy. Paul said in 2 Timothy that they have a form of godliness, but they deny the power thereof. I mean, it has a righteous look to it, but God isn't in it. God's not involved. In Titus 1 and verse 16, it says they profess to know God, but in works they deny him. In works they deny him. Jesus talked about judging by fruits. What are the actions? Forget about what they're doing in front of the camera. I sent this clip out to a couple of people yesterday. You can play clip 16. These are the NBA players getting ready for their basketball game, and they're walking. They have all these stylish clothes on, and every single one of them's wearing a mask as they walk through the halls, getting ready to play down in the bubble, wherever the bubble is in Florida. And I presume about an hour, I didn't watch it, but about an hour after this footage played, these same individuals are out on the court, sweating, breathing heavy, hanging on to each other, draped over one another, breathing on each other, without masks on. But never mind that. If the camera's rolling and it's right before the game or right before the press conference, strap on that mask. It's time for a little bit of political theater. Isaiah 48 in verse 1 talks about the people of Israel swearing by the name of God and making mention of God, even making mention of God, but not in truth, it says. Not in righteousness, it says. Do we need new government? Do we need righteous government? Do we need a godly government that upholds truth? We certainly do, and that's the theme of that trumpet, the November-December trumpet. A new government is coming. Isaiah said that we call evil good and good evil. Everything's just upside down. I didn't have time to play that clip from the debate the other night on yesterday's show. This was Joe Biden, where he said during the debate that Antifa is not an organization. It doesn't exist in his mind. Skip ahead to clip 2 here.
Antifa's an idea, not an organization.
Oh, you got to be
not
kidding.
militia.
You have got to be kidding. You have got to be kidding. Antifa is an idea. It's not an organization. It's an idea. This was how the president responded to that at his rally in Duluth, Minnesota last night. Clip 1.
Joe Biden says Antifa is just an idea. Well, ideas don't assault cops and they don't burn down buildings. Antifa is a domestic terrorist organization.
That's the president stating the truth emphatically. It's a terrorist group. And they've been burning down buildings. They've been shooting police officers. They've been smashing up our cities. And yet here, like I said yesterday, the big takeaway for the radical leftist Democrat media complex, the big takeaway from the debate is what the president did not say about white supremacy. Not what Joe Biden didn't say about Antifa, or the fact that he called Antifa an idea. That's no problem. No, the moderator's got to take you back to 2018, to Charlottesville, to the Tiki Torch, and hear all of these cities, Minneapolis, Kenosha, New York City, Chicago, Seattle, Portland. This is all recent news, headlines, just in the recent weeks and months over this past summer. Antifa, Black Lives Matter leading the way. And these are all Joe Biden supporters. And yet to Chris Wallace, the real threat to American society is some group called the Proud Boys, whoever that is. The Proud Boys? Are the Proud Boys destroying Portland? Or Seattle? Did the Proud Boys take over those 6 blocks in Seattle for however long it was this past summer? Upside down. Call him black, white, evil, good, good, evil. And of course, if someone comes along to try to expose this evil and to tell the truth, then he's going to come under fire from every direction. This was what the president said again last night in Minnesota, clip 3.
Last night I did what the corrupt media has refused to do. I held Joe Biden accountable for his 47 years of lies, 47 years of betrayal, and 47 years of failure. I held Joe accountable for shipping your jobs and dreams abroad and for bowing to the violent mob at home. Can you imagine these people, the way they take over these Democrat cities? I don't even believe it.
I don't even believe it. Taking over these cities. Ruining these cities. He said how disappointed he was. Of course, the moderator, as I said yesterday, the moderator, he comes from Fox News. And the president said last night just how disappointed he is, not just in CNN and the New York Times and the major media, but Fox News as well. Here's clip 4.
So disappointed in Fox. I'm not just running against Joe Biden. I'm running against the corrupt far-left media socialists and communists in the Democrat Party and the special interests who've made a living bleeding our country dry, and that's what's happened for too long.
He's running against the complex. He's running against the Democrats. He's running against the media, the socialists, the communists. What have we told you over the years, over the decades, going back to Mr. Armstrong's ministry, about the communist infiltration? Mr. Armstrong, by the way, in The Wonderful World Tomorrow, I was going through some of that book yesterday, and he just talked about the governments of men, and there's basically 3 of them that have been popular or common in the past century or so. One of them, communism, and there's so many people in the United States and Britain just infatuated with communism. They love it. They love it. And that influence continues to spread. And here's the Jeroboam administration fighting against it, exposing it. And that's why he's such a massive target. Biden, as I said yesterday, Biden survived the debate on Tuesday night. And you listen to the news cycle, the radical left news cycle yesterday, and all through the day, oh, this is horrible. George Will wrote a column saying there shouldn't be any more debates. He used to be a conservative, but he despises Donald Trump. In his mind and in the minds of many others, what happened in that debate Tuesday night? Why, this is possibly the worst thing that's ever happened to America. Here our cities have gone up in flames. And these people, these whited sepulchres, they are concerned most about someone interrupting a political opponent, as if that's never happened in the history of the United States. I'm not defending the process that is U.S. politics. It needs to be replaced. It will be replaced. But these people need to brush up on their history. Some of the debates between Lincoln and Douglas, or going back to the days of Andrew Jackson, or even Thomas Jefferson, John Adams. I forget the case back in the 1800s. This guy in Congress that didn't like what his opponent was saying, and he took his cane and started beating him, nearly beat him to death. This is the world's system. This is the United States. It certainly needs to be replaced. But what do we make of these people that say because President Trump, as if he wasn't interrupted, he was interrupted constantly, but because he interrupted Joe Biden, the one that called him a racist, a clown, a liar, and on it went. And you can go back and look at that debate and see that it started 5, 6, 7 minutes in. Here's Joe Biden telling the United States president, will you shut up, man? Will you shut up? And yet these people, George Will and the others, they're appalled at President Trump. You know what they're most upset about? They're upset about the fact that he pushes back, that he exposes them, that he tells the truth. But they don't like that. Even the ones, quite a few of them on the right, they don't like it. They don't like it. There was a clip yesterday of all these senators, these Republican senators. They came out and they denounced the president's performance, said that he didn't say enough about white supremacy. Everybody just has to go along. There's a spirit here. Will worship is what it's called in Colossians 2. You submit to it, or else everyone's going to attack you. That spirit is strong. So here's Joe Biden. He survives the debate. And then you have all of his friends in the major media complex saying, don't do another debate. Why bother? Why bother? Look at what's going to happen. Jake Tapper said he got a text from his friend that said his 6-year-old daughter, or I guess a 6th grader, went away crying watching the debate. All because of Donald Trump. This is the worst problem in America that we have to deal with now. A debate performance. Even as cities go up in flames. So here's the excuse. Now Biden hasn't come out and said he's not going to be in the second and third debate. But he's certainly getting a lot of pressure from his friends saying don't do it. Evidently, they say he dominated the debate. And yet they don't want him to do number 2 or number 3. Listen to this reporter. Here's some coaching. You hear this all the time. The reporters are out front. They're the ones coaching the favored candidate. And here's an exchange with Joe Biden from yesterday, clip 5.
Is there any scenario where you would not debate the president in these next 2 debates? And are there any changes you want to see made by the commission before you debate?
Well, You know, he not only attacked me constantly and my family, but he attacked the moderator. And again on his tweets this morning or last night. I just hope there's a way in which the debate commission can control the ability of us to answer the question without interruption.
Right. Donald Trump attacked, and those two were whited sepulchers. Joe Biden, Chris Wallace, whited sepulchers. They don't attack. They don't interrupt. Well, they're perfect angels, you see. You see how it works? Listen to what President Trump said last night in Minnesota, clip 6.
You know, Biden lost badly when his supporters are saying he should cancel the rest of the debates. Now I understand he's canceling the debates. Let's see what happens. I think that's not going to be a good move. I don't think that's going to be a good move. I don't think television with those ratings are never going to let him cancel. You don't know television like that. What are they going to do? You know, someday we're not going to be doing this anymore. What are they going to do without Trump? What are they going to do? Oh, those poor people. Look at all of them. Whoa. That's a lot of people. What are they going to do? What are they going to do when in 8, 12, maybe 16 years I said, let's hang it up. Let's hang it up. 16 more years.
16 more years of President Trump. And that's what makes their heads explode when he trolls them that way. But before that, what did he say? You know that Biden lost badly when his supporters are saying he should cancel the rest of the debates. Why should he cancel? If he dominated, if he won the debate, they wanted him to just make it through, and he barely did. And they didn't like the fact. Chris Wallace kept interrupting because he didn't like the fact that Donald Trump was exposing the Biden crimes, Hunter Biden, all these connections, wire transfers from Moscow, from Russia, exposing what he believed about the Green New Deal or didn't believe, the flip-flop, saying that it was Bernie Sanders' party, saying he was being controlled by the radical left. Chris Wallace didn't press Biden on any of that. It was President Trump working, again, 1 against 2. It was a 2-on-1. It was a tag team, Biden and Wallace. And then you see the reaction following the debate. Here's Biden's take, again, from yesterday, clip 7.
The President of the United States conducting himself the way he did, I think it was just a national embarrassment.
A national embarrassment. That's the man who called him, I believe, a clown within 8 minutes. He called the President of the United States a clown. He called him a clown twice. He said early on in the debate, everyone in America knows Donald Trump is a liar. Called him a liar, called him a racist, told him to shut up. And it's Donald Trump who's the national embarrassment. Because of what? He interrupted, I guess. What did he call? He didn't even use some of the nicknames he's given to Joe Biden during the debate. Now, he questioned how smart he was at one point, but again, it's a system of this world. It's not going to solve the problems of this world, no matter who the president is. We know this. But look at the hypocrisy. Look at the double standard. Look at the actions. Look at the fruits. This is from, again, one more clip from President Trump last night in Minnesota, clip 8.
CNN, the New York Times, they think rioting is just okay, just do whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to wear masks. You just riot, 25,000 people standing on each other's face. Do whatever you want. Can you go to church? No. Can you go to restaurants? No. Can you do anything? No, but you can riot. That's okay. Arson's okay, but challenging Sleepy Joe is totally off limits.
He's exactly right about that. You see, challenging Joe Biden, that's off limits. arson, rioting, protesting, that's okay. No going to church services. Or if you do, you got to wear masks. Certainly if the cameras are on, you've got to strap on the masks. He's exposing so much of this fraudulent activity. He's exposing it. And that's why he comes under fire. Tucker Carlson had a pretty fascinating opening monologue last night. He was talking about the debate early on, saying that, America deserves better and so on. But then in the middle of it, he talked about, what you do as opposed to what you say. Here's a clip from last night, clip 9.
Tone is everything. Biden all but admitted on stage that he plans to tear down our system. But he did it in a calm, this is your captain speaking voice. Biden seemed almost reassuring even as he hinted at revolution. Donald Trump, by contrast, defended our system, the system that most people in this country support. Nothing Trump said on stage was radical. Virtually nothing he ever says is radical, at least if you compare it to public opinion polling on the issues. It's his tone that rattles people.
The tone, what he says, that's what rattles people. What he tweets. No more debates, says George Will. We've got to do it to save the country. We don't like the tone. We don't like the tone of this president. Meanwhile, the tone of Joe Biden, well, it sounds perfect as he stands before America and says, let's tear down the system. We need a revolution. Here again, judge by the fruits, the actions. What are they doing or not doing? Clip 10.
And so in the end, amazingly, tragically, many people watching last night may have concluded that Joe Biden is the stable, steady alternative. They concluded this even as Joe Biden suggested that he plans to change their lives, their country, permanently and forever in ways they won't like.
That's Tucker Carlson from his monologue last night, talking about how upside down it is for people to conclude that Biden is the stable one when he's there calling for revolution, or at least stopping just short of calling for that. Tear down the system. How did he learn to do this so well? Well, as even Tucker Carlson said, he's a disciple. Biden is a disciple of Barack Obama. Here's clip 11.
It's quite a trick. The illusion of reasonableness. Barack Obama was the master of this. Biden learned well.
Barack Obama was the master of this, as he calls it, the illusion of reasonableness. It sounds so reasonable. Fundamentally transform the United States of America. Well, hang on a second. What do you mean by transformation? It all sounded so reasonable. A lot of it sounds so reasonable. I mean, we've got to open this investigation. There's connections to Russia. Now we know where the connections really were. They go right from Russia to the Bidens, to the Clintons, to the Obamas. Those are the deeds. And yet so many people pressured to just go along, these Republican senators yesterday. They could not criticize the president enough. And yet look at what has happened. Look at what is happening. Look at what some of these political families that have been in politics for decades, look at what they've gotten away with. Will worship. Colossians 2, we've talked about it before. Corruption in government. Well, this was one pretty big section in the opening pages of the World Tomorrow book. It's failed us. Education's failed us. This world needs new government. The United States needs new government. What does my father say in that article? It's becoming clearer than ever that the leaders and governments of this world do not have real answers to the problems we face. In many countries, dissatisfaction and anger with government are spreading faster than coronavirus. This is a problem that's much worse than this pandemic we've seen over the past few months. A new government, though, is coming. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the new government and the peace and the prosperity and the unity and the love and the togetherness that it will bring to this world. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. If you'd like to email the program, you can send comments to td@kpcg.fm. We'll be right back.
This is KPCG-FM, and this is the Trumpet Daily. One may blind his eyes to existing facts and trends and say the world cannot get any worse than it already is. Or, if we just ignore the conditions and don't worry, perhaps they'll go away. But these conditions and trends won't just go away, not unless they are caused to go away. The scriptures of the Holy Bible, the inspired revelation of the Supreme God, have foretold today's world conditions and trends, and give us the advance news of coming peace on earth, of universal prosperity, of happiness and joy, of veritable utopia. This is the good news of the world tomorrow, and it is absolutely sure. This coming world is vividly described in our booklet, The Wonderful World Tomorrow, what it will be like. Bible prophecy explains in detail how God will intervene to save mankind from destroying himself. Jesus Christ will return to earth, putting an end to the rule of man and restore God's government on earth. To learn much more about this prophesied utopia, please visit thetrumpet.com. This is KPCG-FM, and this is the Trumpet Daily.
Yesterday, I went through this prophecy in Acts 3, verses 19 through 21, this section of Scripture that talks about a coming restitution of all things. And as I mentioned on yesterday's show, that's speaking first and foremost about the restoration of God's government on this earth. Lucifer took it away when he rebelled against the rule, the authority of God. And he became Satan the devil. And he's still the God of this world, as so many scriptures bring out. 2 Corinthians 4 and verse 4, Revelation 12:9. The prince of the power of the air. But when Jesus Christ returns to this earth, as it says in Acts 3, God's government will be set up and established on this earth. And we, those of us in God's church, we're going to be assisting Jesus Christ, the bride of Christ, ruling with Jesus Christ. Revelation 2:26, it says, "And he that overcomes and keeps my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. As the vessels of a potter shall they be broken to shivers, even as I received of my Father." See, as Herbert Armstrong taught us over the course of his 50-year ministry, God is preparing us to rule, to lead. This world is so deceived about life after death, thinking that a life of idleness and ease as we float around in the clouds playing harps, that's what we're here to aim for. In fact, God is preparing us to rule and to teach and to build families and to build a utopia. That is coming. That is coming. This is actually Revelation 3, verse 21. "To him that overcomes will I grant to sit with me in my throne, even as I also overcame, and am set down with my Father in his throne." Christ says to his disciples, God's disciples, if you overcome like I did, then you can rule with me just like I rule with God. Herbert Armstrong said back in 1976, he said, God isn't trying to save the world. He's not trying to save this world. A lot of people in the traditional Christian world, they really believe this. They believe it's like a tug of war. That's why they're all in with politics. They've got to get the favored leader in there, and then we can start making more progress in trying to reach people, in trying to get people saved before it's too late. Well, step back and look at the world. Look at the mayhem. Look at the unhappiness, the dissatisfaction. Look at the problems in the third world nations, and then consider the problems in our nations. Mr. Armstrong in the World Tomorrow book, by the way, he takes one last look, as he says early on in that book, at the world today, because it's about to end. A new world is coming. That message in 1976, Mr. Armstrong said, God isn't trying to save the world until Christ comes to do it. Christ is coming to save the world. He is coming to save this world. Matthew 24, 21, and 22. If he did not intervene in the affairs of mankind, human life would be extinguished from off the earth. That's what the prophecy in the New Testament, in the Gospel of Matthew, that's what it says. Christ is coming to save the world. Mr. Armstrong, in that message, he went on to explain why we observe the Feast of Atonement and the Feast of Tabernacles, and then the last great day, and how that these annual festivals, they constantly remind us of God's awesome purpose and plan. And there was Herbert Armstrong probably raising his voice, trying to get across this message to God's people. And at one point in that message, he said, and yet we don't believe it, do we? We don't believe that Christ is coming back to save the world. We're sitting here in church, we're listening to these sermons, but we don't really believe. If he only knew. I mean, that was a statement he made in 1976. I should have pulled the soundbite. 1976. He died in 1986. He died 10 years later. And of course, at that time, he knew as well that most in the church, the worldwide church of God, God's true church, most had gone to sleep spiritually. They had gone to sleep. He said in 1985, there's so much Protestantism that rubs off on us, where we think that God's trying to save the world now. Why does God bring us into the church? It's so that we can help support the work and so that we can prepare for our awesome calling as rulers with Christ. This is from that same message, that same sermon. Mr. Armstrong said, God has given you the Holy Spirit to help get the job done, to get in back of me and getting the announcement to the world, that announcement being the kingdom of God message, the gospel message. He says, and for no other purpose except as means of you getting your own spiritual growth and growing up in the Spirit and growing in the grace and the knowledge, so that you can be there with me on the throne of Christ with the power of ruling the nations when we go out to save the world. That's when we're going to save the world. We're only called now to get the training and to learn these things so we'll be ready to save the world when the time comes, to save the world when Jesus Christ returns. He says, finally, God has raised me up as a special apostle with a very special mission, and we get all competing and think we're just like any other church. He says, we're so different from any other church, as different as God is from Satan. That's quite a statement. That's quite a statement, but you read through 2 Corinthians 11, and there is described this system, this universal system, in fact, this religious system, where there's a gospel, a false gospel, a gospel about Christ. It says in that passage, Paul wrote it, 2 Corinthians 11, said that he has false apostles, false ministers. And we shouldn't be surprised by this, because even Satan himself comes as an angel of light. He comes looking like an angel. Remember what Tucker Carlson said about the tone, the appearance, the look. Why, it looks like an angel. Even as he says, tear down the system. But he says it in a nice way, you see. That's the way Satan operates. He's mastered that technique. We've been called to rule with Christ. The whole purpose and plan of God revolves around this precious truth that you can read about in Acts 3, the restoration of God's government on this earth. Let's look at Isaiah 11. This chapter in Isaiah, it's a prophecy. It's describing the government of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ ruling the world in righteousness, with truth, administering God's government. And look at the society as it's described. Look at civilization as it's described here in this beautiful chapter, this beautiful prophecy. This will set our minds where they need to be set as we get ready for the Feast of Tabernacles. Isaiah 11 and verse 1, it says, "And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch that shall grow out of his roots." This stem of Jesse, that's referring to David, actually, King David. He's going to be resurrected. It's amazing to me, just in some of my feast studies, how often this is mentioned in the prophets. The fact that David, King David, is going to be resurrected to rule. Even that reveals a lot about our purpose. Why we're brought into the church now, what we're preparing for. But the rod, or the offshoot that came out of David, well, that refers to Jesus Christ. You can see that in Acts 13. I won't go over there for the sake of time. But verse 2 here in Isaiah 11, it says, "And the Spirit of the Eternal shall rest upon him, the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of God." See, here's rulership with substance, righteous rule. This is not talking about rule that just has the impressive appearance or the right tone, perhaps. This is righteous leadership. This is leadership that relies upon the laws of God, the truth of God. What did that verse? I gave it to you at the start, Isaiah 48 and verse 1. Our people that swear by the name of the Lord, that make mention of God, but not in truth, not in righteousness. Well, that's about to change. That's about to change. No more hypocrisy. No more fake news. No more fraudulent behavior. As I read to you yesterday, no more political campaigns. No more mudslinging. No more arguing over who's right, who's wrong. No more violence, no more crime. Verse 3 says, "And shall make him of quick understanding in the fear of the Eternal, and he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears." What is that getting at? Well, God, in the scriptures, it talks about God judging by, what's going on the inside. He looks on the heart. He judges the fruits, the actions, what you're producing or not producing, and what's coming from your heart. Anyone can just give impressive words, a few words, or maybe the right tone. This illusion of reasonableness. as Tucker said. But what substance is there? That's what God's interested in. Verse 4, it says, but with righteousness shall he, that's speaking of this offshoot or branch of David, it says, but with righteousness shall Christ judge the poor and reprove the equity for the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips shall he slay the wicked. So here is the reign of Jesus Christ. It's describing the reign of Christ over the earth, ruling with the rod of iron, just like we read in Revelation 2 and 3. Ruling with godly authority. People aren't going to receive him well, as we know from other prophecies. When he returns to this earth, we're going to fight against him. But once he puts down that rebellion, then what sets in? Verse 5, it says, and the righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and the faithfulness the girdle of his reins, ruling, righteous rule. I gave you this quote yesterday, where Mr. Armstrong said it'll be a divine government, a theocracy, the government of God ruling over humans. No human will be given any office, any government office. All in government service will then be divine spirit beings in the kingdom of God, the God family. That's what we're preparing for. That's what we're in training to do, to rule with Christ. Verse 6, it says, the wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf, and the young lion, and the fatling together. And the little child shall lead them. Here's one of the most vivid and memorable descriptions of life in the wonderful world of tomorrow. The wolf dwelling together with a little lamb. You don't see that today. And a child playing with a lion. A child playing with a ferocious, what was a ferocious beast, but now it's like a gentle house pet. Is this far-fetched? Does this seem impossible? For man it is impossible to build a utopia. But when God sets his hand to do it, he will do it. It will happen. Verse 7, and the cow and the bear shall feed. Their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. So he's going to miraculously intervene to even change the physical makeup of these animals that will feed on straw like cattle. They won't be a ferocious animal anymore. And of course, the most miraculous change of all, you could read about this in Ezekiel 36 and elsewhere, is when God changes the heart of man. When the Spirit of God covers the earth. Verse 8, it says, and the sucking child shall play on the hole of the asp or snake, and the weaned child shall put his hand in the cockatrice den. Verse 9 says, they shall not hurt nor destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth shall be full of the knowledge of the eternal, as the waters cover the sea. You see, animals no longer killing one another for food. Human beings no longer hurting or killing each other or destroying cities. The knowledge of God filling the earth. Here's what it says in the God Family Vision. This is my father's book. Why build those colleges throughout history if men were only going to turn away from them? Because he's talking about some of the history with God's church, God's people, and you can see it in the Old Testament and the New. Schools, the importance of schools to teach our young people, to train them, to prepare them for marriage, for family, for their calling in the church, for their future in God's wonderful world of tomorrow. You think about why we have Armstrong College here and in the UK, and the training that these young people receive. My father writes, in the world tomorrow, God will establish those colleges all around the world, many thousands of them, and the first fruits will lead those colleges as they declare the Father and his God family vision. Then God's knowledge, this vision, will cover the earth as the waters fill the ocean beds. And we're learning how to do that today. The church is a college for those teachers You see, in training to rule, preparing to teach. Verse 10 here in Isaiah 11, it says, "And in that day there shall be a root of Jesse," that's speaking of Christ, "which shall stand for an ensign of the people, and to it, to Christ, shall the Gentiles seek." Even Gentile nations will seek after Christ, and his rest shall be glorious. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Eternal shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people. That's speaking of the Israelites that go into captivity during the Great Tribulation, scattered over all the earth. And here is where God, it's prophesied that God will regather them. And they'll be situated in and around Jerusalem. It says, "Which shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush and Elam and from Shinar," all over the place. You see scattered. And they'll be regathered. The Gentiles will seek after Christ and the government of God. Satan will be put away, as we know from the meaning of atonement. And God and the first fruits, Jesus Christ and the first fruits, will be busy, active and busy, building a utopia, building a wonderful world, the wonderful world of tomorrow. Verse 12 says, "And he shall set up an ensign for all the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth." This is describing God's world. God reproducing himself. That is his purpose and plan. This world today, it's gone the way or the course of Satan the devil now for almost 6,000 years. And here we are right at the last, and we've seen the fruits of man's way, of man's systems, of man's system of education, of government, of religion, and all the confusion and the unhappiness, and the violence and the crime, and the family division. But God has a purpose and a plan that he's working out here below. He has a plan. It allowed for Jesus Christ, his Son, to come in the flesh and to die for mankind. Not only that, to establish the church. To establish the church. And the main function of the church is to prepare people for positions of rule, for leadership, so that when Christ finally does return to this earth, as is described in Revelation, as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. That's King of Kings and Lord of Lords. What kind of kings, plural, and lords, plural? The rulers like we see in the world today? No, these are leaders, these are rulers that have been thoroughly prepared and trained in the ways of God, taught the truth of God, bringing the truth of God into their families, into their marriages, into their lives. Satan, as I say, he's put away by this point, and God will proceed to reproduce himself in every human being on earth. In fact, in every human being who's ever lived. By resurrection from the dead, by being brought back to life physically in a utopian society where they can then learn to practice the ways of God, to put into practice the truth of God, to grow in character, to develop righteousness, and eventually to be born into God's family. You can go all the way back to Genesis 1 and verse 26 and get a little snapshot there of God's awesome purpose. You're listening to Stephen Flurry, and this is the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. If you'd like to email the program, you can send comments to td@kpcg.fm. Thank you for joining us on today's show, and we'll see you tomorrow.